Here with the Deutz group today. I'm Troy Deutz.
Cynthia Rogers.
Kaylee Swenson.
Randy Core.
And Matt Gillund.
And to make that abundantly clear, they are not part of the Deutz group. These gentlemen are our guests today. They are inspectors that we use quite frequently. There's other inspectors as well. These are just some of the ones that we work with quite a bit. And yeah, we want to talk today about what an inspection is, what it costs, and a couple other things that we'll touch on. So excited to hear what you guys have to say.
I mean, an inspection in a nutshell is a report of the general condition, overall condition of a home. And the basic items are the structure, what holds it up, the covering on the outside, the shingles, siding, windows, etc. Then all your mechanics on the inside, your plumbing, electric, heating, and from there it gets to be a lot of details. So those are the main things.
One of the first questions I get all the time is, what's it cost, Randy? And this is going to be a ballpark figure because obviously houses are different sizes and different levels, and people test different things from mold to radon to the house. So I'll let you touch on that.
Certainly, there's a range there, but I guess an average house is around 3 1/4. A radon test, 110. You know, you got outbuildings, so there's always extra, and outbuildings can really vary. Sometimes they got heat and plumbing and bathrooms. But for a test and inspection, you know, 425, 450 is going to get you pretty close.
That's everything.
For everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Both of you have great experience and you've been doing this for a while. When you're meeting with the clients, what are you finding is the number one thing that the clients are concerned? What are they looking for? What are they telling you?
Yeah, it certainly depends on the time of year, because in the spring or summer, wet, why is it wet in the corner? So then we're going back outside and looking at gutters and the grade and stuff like that. Right now, ice dams are a very common question. Why is there ice dams? How do I get rid of it? And it's a hard problem, and it can be a bit expensive to actually get rid of them, but that's something that I know comes up quite often.
Anything come to mind off Cynthia's question for you, Matt?
Well, like with the seasons, you know, the shingles often are just covered in snow. So sometimes if you can even see a melted area, you get up there with your ladder and you look at a little representative amount and you hope it resembles it well, but we just don't know. So that's a risk in the winter as far as inspections.
Right.
Typically, your agent can look up the age of the roof if the homeowner wouldn't know, because it should be recorded with the city or the county. So just ask anyone on the Deutz group, or you can ask the inspector, and they'll always answer to the best of their knowledge or find out the best answer for you.
I think a big question I always get, and especially like you said, seasonally when it's wet out, you have all this stuff going on. I always get a big question on mold. How is the inspector going to test for mold? What's the inspector going to do with mold? How do they tell us, you know, if it's present or there's a musty basement smell? So what do you guys do with that, and how do you advise buyers on that, you know, specific category?
Yeah, and I don't know what Matt does. I don't do any mold tests, so it's all visual, and it's, you know, looking at evidence
Right.
of what I can see.
Right.
But like I say, if it really looks bad, then we're recommending a mold test.
Yeah, same with me. I just do a visual only, so
So that's just outsourced typically.
pretty much.
Yep, okay. And then they will give recommendations, and we have some ourselves for mold testing, and the same would be for fireplace inspections. What else am I missing that you guys would outsource?
Yeah, major structural issues. The radon mitigation, that's gotta have a special license, and there's a few of them around, so.
I joke about it a lot personally, but the dad that comes with to the home inspection, let's talk about that a little bit. So, I mean, you guys, you know, your job is to point out the issues, but we also don't, you know, we don't want to scare the client, because a lot of these issues they're common, you know. It's a really common thing. So how do we how do you guys put the dad that is, you know, dare I say, overbearing or just overly concerned for their child or relative or whoever they're looking out for, the super dad? What's the best way to, you know, put their mind at ease? Is it making sure they're at the inspection, or what are some things that you guys do?
Well, for me, it can finally come down to just say, hey, if you want a second opinion, do you know any contractors that you trust? Bring them in and have them look at it. Then it's off of me, and if I can't convince them otherwise with my experience, then that's the next step that I can think of, so.
And you can bring those people with to the inspection that these guys are doing if it puts your mind at ease, because that's what's important, right?
Right.
I mean, it's to put the client's mind at ease and pointing out everything that we can. So if it means bringing another person in, I mean, we encourage it. Make yourself comfortable. How
Yeah,
about
I would
you,
say
Randy?
my favorite time is when it's a young couple and both dads are there. I'm kidding,
Ah.
that is not my favorite time. I don't mind people being there, but when sometimes it's like, hey Randy, can you look at this? And you get pulled around, so you really gotta focus. I prefer to do the inspection mostly alone at the beginning and then have them join me. That's my favorite, but people are more than welcome to come from the beginning. I just have to make sure I know where I left off when I get pulled away. And there's, dads know a lot. They've had houses, so it's always good to listen to what they got to say.
For sure.
And there are times when I don't have an answer, so then, we do as much research as we can at the site, and we may recommend somebody, like Matt said, to take another look, so.
Yeah, I think you guys both do a really good job of, if you don't know, you don't pretend to, and you outsource it as best you can.
Right.
Talking about the timetable, maybe touch on that, Cynthia. Typically the buyers come at what point in the inspection? Because most of them are around 3 hours, right? You guys
Yep,
usually
2.5,
schedule 3 hours.
Yep.
Yes.
I think usually, don't you, maybe the last hour and a
Yep.
half, where you can take them from point A to point B, go through the highlights of issues you found. I know personally, I found with my clients, it's been really helpful, and I think having that explanation can really set their mind at ease, because I think if you see things in black and white, you don't understand what they are, it can be really frightening and overwhelming, because there's a lot of data in your reports. But when you take that time and you're explaining, it just takes that fear and brings it down for them.
That's very true, yeah. I feel like the fear, if they're there, you get a better feel, they get a better feel. When they're not there, that's a little scary, because I send the report off and I don't know what they're thinking. And sometimes I never hear, they talk to you guys. And, but it is not, I do want them to come to the end of the inspection, because it's more clear to them.
I'd like to just share that it's always, I've really appreciated your availability, both of you, after the fact. And if the buyer has questions and they're moving through trying to resolve these things, that you're available and you'll continue to answer questions, and you don't just quit working for them or the house as soon as you've handed off that report. And I just think that's to your credit, and really want to offer kudos, because that's very helpful.
Sure.
That's part of the job, so.
Well, you guys wouldn't be sitting here if we didn't think you did a good job, so.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I agree with that. Yeah, I usually kind of educate my buyers to obviously coordinate with their inspectors, whichever one they had chosen. And I typically at least say you'll attend the last 30 minutes or so, whatever their inspector kind of walks you through. But really, that 30 minutes that buyer has the opportunity to, attend the inspection makes a huge difference. By the time, at least from my own
I
personal
would
opinion,
agree.
by the time the buyer attends and then calls me and we go through the report together, it is night and day difference than buyers that don't attend it. They're like,
I would
I
agree.
talked with Matt or talked with
That's
Brandy,
good to
we
know.
walked through this, and there's some stuff in an inspection that I look at and I'm like, okay, this is significant. I would, put this on an inspection memo. And sometimes buyers who don't attend or don't have that same opinion will not even talk about it, And so it's very different when you attend and fully understand the words in that report versus just reading it and being like, this is a huge red flag, when in reality, like Troy said, it's a pretty common item that, especially in Southwest Minnesota, we're going to run into a lot of those,
That also makes me think about one other point, and that's just to make sure that people understand this data is private data. It doesn't come to us without the buyer's consent, and the inspectors don't share that information without a release and allowing it. It's helpful when it can be shared with us, because we can help walk through some of those things, and you've looked at enough to have the eye for, we need to be aware of this, and this is going to come up in your financing, we should be dealing with this. But it's your information, and it doesn't get shared with us unless you allow. And I think the inspectors are really good about protecting that confidentiality and that privacy.
Yeah, it can be difficult when the buyer or the seller gives you a call.
Yeah.
Hey, what's the radon tests come in, or what's this issue or that? And so you gotta be a little careful and say, I'd love to tell you, but we have to go through talk to the realtor.
Do you have any nightmare stories of maybe you've attended an inspection and a seller was there and followed you around absolutely everywhere? Like, do you have any scenarios in your head that you can remember that was just like awful?
I can.
Truth, Randy.
I've got a few.
Turn's coming, man.
Well, one was a Whirlpool tub. I'm upstairs, fill that baby up, turn the jets on, and I'm checking other fixtures and whatnot. All of a sudden, luckily, the client was there roaming around the house. Randy, there's water raining down in the basement bathroom. So I shut it off. Yeah, there was
The
a
water feature no one wanted.
Yeah. It wasn't supposed to be a shower down there. It was a pipe that was leaking from, and they never, apparently the owners hadn't used it in many years, or maybe that's why. But so now when I run those, I'm really watching for leaks. Shut that off right away. But you gotta test it.
That'll do it.
I had one similar actually a couple weeks ago. The water was off at the house, so I asked the realtor if I could turn it on, so I did. Turned it on and started inspecting, and for some reason my mind told me like 20 minutes later, let's just go to the upper level and start up there. And all of a sudden I heard water running, and it was a big corner jacuzzi hot tub. And it was getting close to the top, and there was no overflow. I was just thankful. If I would have just not went up there for some reason, it would probably not have been good. So for some reason, the seller opened the valves on the hot tub upstairs only, and then shut the water off in the basement. I'm like, am I being set up? I don't, for damage. I mean.
So to lead off that, this is one that I often run into with my sellers. Matt, I don't know if you do specifically, Randy, but Matt will typically send out an email or a notification to the buyer or the listing agent and just say, hey, prior to my inspection, please make sure the water is on. Please make sure utilities are on. Please have attic access, all of those things. So
And this is for the seller.
For the
really.
seller,
So
yes.
sellers, pay attention to this because it will come to you.
Because at the end of the day, it impacts their buyer. If your inspector goes and they can't get into the attic, guess what? They're probably going back again. And so this is on listing agents. But what do you guys do in those situations when like the water's off or something major is off that you need to check? Like, what's your next step?
For me, it's a phone call to the realtor. Can I turn this water on? And as I'm waiting for answers, I'm looking to see, is everything hooked up here? To make sure
Okay.
that it can be turned on.
And if you get that approval, you'll turn it on and you'll
Turn it
continue,
on.
okay?
Yeah. If they're winterized, that's another, okay, now who's gonna winterize it again when I'm done? That's happened a few times, but not a lot.
Okay.
It's a liability. I always reach out to the selling agent, say, hey, can I turn it on? Because if I do it without permission and something happens, I didn't get permission, it's
Right.
not worth it. So as far as attics, sometimes, they're so cluttered, closets, shelves, you name it. You gotta use a judgment call, like how much time
Always
do I wanna
got
spend?
clutter.
What's that?
Everything's wide open.
Not always, but, so a lot of times it's a judgment call, like, do I wanna spend 20 minutes removing all of the shampoos, everything, and then getting up there and going back, or do I just say, hey, I'll come back if you remove this?
Removing the shampoos.
Well, that's just a little bit of it. There's a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
but it is, like to Matt's point, you move something, you break something, you touch something and all of a sudden it's missing. And so just from a realtor, listing agent, seller perspective, it is super, super important to go through those steps and have your house ready to be inspected. So these guys don't have to waste all their time making calls and doing all this extra work, and then your buyers get a full report and there's no lingering questions of why didn't they make the access to the attic accessible. So that's just one thing that I was kind of thinking. So
Well, that sheet made a big difference, I could tell. Even in like fireplace, pilot lights are often off. And I don't wanna go in there and start clicking and trying to turn on valves. So that's one of my comments too. And I've noticed most of the fireplace pilot lights are on now. Sometimes the attic is not only accessible, there's a ladder for me and it's open.
Yeah.
So,
Those are the dads that want it.
they were the ones that went up there and shuffled the bathroom around.
so it made a difference. It
Those are
definitely
my
makes a
favorite.
difference. So.
A couple other things that these gentlemen don't do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is septic and well testing. So if you guys got more questions on that, we can't tell you everything, but that's primarily done, lined up through your realtor. So, yeah, it's good things to keep in mind.
One thing I added too to that was removal of pets if possible. That's
Harper!
that can get
How
that
many
can
dog
get
bites?
interesting. Often you go up to the doorbell and as soon as you push it, there's dogs in the window showing their teeth and barking. It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
So you don't know.
One question I have for you guys, I often get this. I have and I think everyone, for a crazy amount of time, we had a lot of virtual buyers. They would look at the house virtually, they would do the inspection virtually, and so I haven't done it specifically with Randy, but I know there were times that, you know, Matt, you would sometimes get on FaceTime with my clients and walk them through and talk to them a little bit at the end. What do you guys do in that case when you're doing an inspection and the buyers virtually wants to attend but obviously physically can't be there? Like, what's your process? What do you tell them? Why? Just kind of touch on that.
Yeah, I have done a few FaceTimes, not a lot. Otherwise, it's usually getting on the phone while I'm still there. I like to get on the phone.
Cool. Okay.
I know I had one, they'd never been to the house, and I said, well, you know how it slopes towards the middle? I didn't know they had never been to the house. It slopes towards the middle, and I said, well, yeah, it's a 120-year-old house, and they do that. Oh, I didn't know that. And so that had some structural issues, so that's how that led up to that. But yeah, I mostly phone call or FaceTime. But
Yeah, it feels different when you know they haven't been there because some things are just not the same as the
Right.
photos online, and you're like, I hope they realize this because they didn't walk through. So it makes it a little different when you're inspecting and how detailed to be. So
And you guys, after that, obviously compile your reports, you email it out to them, and kind of take the time to go through it with them if they need it and all of that.
yeah,
right.
We'll almost always get the report, the buyer sends it to us, and we go through it with you. You know, I go through the whole report, I believe these
Yep.
lovely ladies do the same thing, go through the entire thing, we talk about what's common to ask for, what's not so common. You know, if you do ask for these, you know, and you were in a competing situation to get the house, well, maybe you're not gonna be able to ask for them now. So, just some things to keep in mind. It goes really deep, but we're just trying to bring a little light to the overall process.
I think it's really important to remember that it's a used house. It's a used house. It's not new. And it's not going to be perfect. And the point isn't, there will be a laundry list, which is your job, is to provide that laundry list. But our job is to help decide and help you direct to what needs to be addressed and what's immediate and what's maintenance and ongoing. And hey, be aware, heads up.
One more item that I always get asked, so like in-floor heat systems, or when you guys are going through like radiant heat, right? What tools or mechanisms do you guys use to check the heat sources and show that all of those, you know, parts are working and it's heating properly when you can't see them?
Yeah, the radiant heat's been a challenge. I think you've got the FLIR or
the
the
FLIR,
camera.
yes.
I use my knuckles on the back of and I find the hot spots on the ceiling. That's how I've always done it, but
Okay.
that may change in the future. But and then anytime there's a gauge, like boilers and stuff, you're watching gauges. If it's hot water heat in a basement floor or a garage floor, there are things you can check to make sure it's heating up
Okay.
in that time frame, because you might not feel it. But yeah.
Yeah, I personally use a thermal imager that goes to my phone, and it's really slick, and I just take photos of everything glowing and put it in the report so they know. It's not uncommon to have a boiler with a bunch of different radiators in all the rooms, and I go to each room and all of a sudden one of them is not glowing. So I put in there, this one is not working, this one is not working. So it's like, same with floor heat, you can see all the water lines in the cement. I mean, it's nice, it really keeps the liability down, so.
I've noticed that is helpful for my clients because I get a lot of clients that are like, radiant heat, why, how does that work? You know, how do you know if it's not working? And
As
so
if by magic.
I know. So those are big ones that I often get in-floor heat, and so I think that's helpful. I like that.
And those radiators are tough because sometimes they turn one off in a room, and you don't really want to turn those valves. They're really
Yes,
old.
yes.
And the leaks come. But
Yeah.
So one thing I want to talk about, and I don't really expect you guys to say much, because us as realtors are always going to encourage you to do an inspection. However, in this market that we've seen, you know, really the last 5-6 years, a lot of times buyers are not doing an inspection. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you guys know the pros and cons. If you are wanting to do an inspection or not, it is your choice, it's not ours. you're probably gonna have a better chance at getting the house if you don't do an inspection, but it's gonna be your decision because you're the one buying the house, you're the one living in the house. So that option's out there, and it does enhance your offer to get the house because it's more palatable, yeah, appealing to the seller because, well, it's one less hurdle for them to jump over. And you can do an inspection after the fact too. You don't have to do it, or you can make the inspection only for your knowledge. So there's a million different ways to size it up to get you the house that you want on the terms that you want. And you've got pros here sitting in front of you today that know how to go through those different steps and give you the best chance of getting the home you want while honoring your wishes.
Good points.
Mhm.